Benoit Grégoire and Frank Escoub.
Ah, c'est Franck, yes, pas François.
Yeah.
Okay. There is a François in François Burat. He's also in the.
Yeah, I kind of mixed them up, but it was Franck I was thinking about.
So one interesting sort of piece that connects these different communities a bit is part of the Catalyst program is people from the Open University in the UK, including Simon Buckingham-Shum, who has done a lot of work around sense making. And actually, the Open University was responsible for a platform called Compendium. Compendium was an open source desktop application originally developed for Verizon, the phone company here in the States, for sense making and concept mapping. I used that since 2007 for my own personal use, for my own research, for my own consulting, sometimes for mapping out sort of conversations and sort of complex ecosystems. And that was a big inspiration actually to building Metamaps as well, and that's inspired a lot of the design as well. Of course, that was not collaborative, and it was not computational. These were two things which were immensely necessary that I wanted to see happen, right? One of the things was we've got to be able to do this together in real time. So yeah, I guess they've gone ahead to develop some other types of interfaces beyond a map interface for the input of sort of structuring conversation.
Really something that's missing.
Yeah. I mean, I've been a part of, so Tibor, this is just some background for you about me. So I've been a part of different communities who have been exploring, okay, where can we best place our energy to affect meaningful social change and transformation in our communities. And I've been involved in that since I sort of broke off from filmmaking. I actually studied film in Paris. I lived there for about 4 years.
Tu parles français alors?
Oui, je parle un petit peu de français. J'avais oublié presque tout, mais je peux comprendre. Ouais.
Ah, c'est bien.
Super.
Ouais. So after film school, I very quickly got into collective intelligence and semantic computation and all sorts of other these fun topics, including sort of structured sense making, as was explored by the Open University and the work that they were doing. In about 2010, I was involved in a project called Junto, which was a project about sort of radical open telepresence. So it's like, how can we come together, hold conversations on really meaningful issues, and come up and design solutions together. At that stage, I was doing a lot of mapping, and I understood that we were having the conversations again and again, yet we weren't able to take those forward with us and continue building upon them. Right? So it was like we would create this momentum, and it would evaporate. It would assimilate into the collective consciousness, or however you want to say that.
The memory would disappear.
Yeah. Therefore, Metamaps are sort of our vision about how we could capture these conversations, how we could make sense of them, how we could extract insights and stories from them, and hopefully come to action in some ways. So that's just the short version of the background. And there's a lot of research into semantic computation, into graph theory and graph analysis, into sense making as a general concept across different domains and sort of language, like different domain languages, I would say, and how does it apply to different domains of knowledge. And also I got very much into data and sort of constructing data methodologies. That's what I was doing for a job for a while, is actually sort of designing analytics methodologies. So, a lot of this we are not yet exploring in Metamaps. We don't have much computation in Metamaps at all currently. But what's been a very interesting process for me is understanding through the design and development, how meaningful the user interface is for actually manipulating graphs and manipulating networks, and how much work actually needs to be done there for that. You know.
Yeah,
So,
I haven't seen for a while, so.
Yeah, and we just did this. We just did this update to Metamaps at the end of November. It's significantly better in terms of the user experience design. The performance is better, although it's got a long ways to go. And the documentation is better for the project as a whole, as well as the code itself. It's much better organized than it was. So it's almost more accessible for participation.
Excellent. Excellent. It's funny because the presentation and the first feeling you get out of Metamaps is not a discussion tool. It's more of a mind mapping tool or a network mapping tool. And the fact that you expose it, it's really interesting on our part, because we're there's a module inside this, which is actually inside the human pixel, which is incubated as a democratic discussion tool, which is called Meeting. It's been put aside a bit so that the communected side, part gets developed. Communected, it means it's actually a French word, communected, since you speak French. Communino is the city, and we are communicating. It's a part of a citizen. It's an ownership that we have from birth, that we're allowed to be connected to our city without just an email and a postal code, and that opens up a whole load of features and toolboxes to communicate within the city, with other people who live close. Everything comes back to the local problems. We come back to the essential, what we can really act on and what we can benefit from. And Metamaps, actually, that's how I stumbled on Metamaps, because was always I'm a big collectioner of graphs and mind mapping tools, and of course Metamaps came through, and played around with it, but I didn't grasp that discussion part of it. I didn't see it as a discussion tool, which maybe you have other ideas in the roadmap that would go in that direction. But if you, I don't know what I could start with. Maybe present a bit the human pixel and how, or what could be an interesting collaboration frontier with Metamaps. Or maybe Helen, you want to present as well yourself first, or I don't know.
I don't know.
Okay, so the idea behind the human pixel, you have it's fairly simple in explaining. It's a social network which comes down to living locally. It's locally finding. So here's a little teaser we made for. It's in French, so it's good for everyone. We'll practice the French, but we have to do it in English, so it's more portable. It's a little teaser, and it's a free citizen social network where we're trying to build a dynamic locally and create a whole set of tools, and doing it in a semantic manner. Everything is LD, JSON LD in the core, and the idea is to keep it all interoperable, so that we don't necessarily have to keep it all in one platform, which is called a human pixel, but in a distributed way. It's not going to try and be a diaspora or it's a place where people can communicate together locally, very locally, and to try and create a dynamic to find out. You can find where are the musicians in your street or in your town. If you don't, try and stop having people drive miles away to find service. Trying to bring find a little tool to do some network mapping, local network mapping, which will also work globally, because you know, the fact that we're all spread apart, Barcelona, LA, talked about Australia, you know, it doesn't make a difference. We can also connect on that. So it works on the small scale, on the very low scale, but it also has an approach of the global scale. So we have this kind of administrative zoom, where we can look at, you can look at your network, where only you see only your friends or the people you're connected to. You can see the information from your the square, or en français le quartier, then the commune, then the department, then la région, and then the country. So according to your level of information, and you'll have access to more or less information, and that's crossed on the double axis with a tagging system, where you can select themes and information that you are interested in. Might it be on classifieds, on the news feeds, whatever. It's an aim to be local and try and organize communities locally. So that's how we kind of connected with all these other projects like Assemblée Virtuelle, because they have the discussion approach. That was the one we kind of connected on. But in the meantime, we also brought in this new concept, which is the communication, and we're kind of floating around. As you say, we're not quite sure where their specifications aren't totally set yet. But we've met up with RISI, who are working on mapping tools as well.
I know Dor.
Yeah, Dor.
Yeah.
And really a lot of very really interesting meetups. And we met up with Unisson in Brest at the Forum des usages coopératifs, the cooperative usages. I don't know, but and there we met lots of projects who were really participatory, collaboration oriented, and and really showed that there's a huge place. We're also working on Communected has a whole facet to it, which is a connected territory. And the idea is to have any territory, you can build either a real territory, which is really a geographically positioned location, and connect information to that. So that would be very close to what Metamaps is doing. And you can also create virtual territories, but the idea of a community itself is a territory in a way. And so that's, I think, where those two worlds are come together, is that the information mapping tool that Metamaps is can definitely represent the information that is given by a real use case scenario of a connection. For a citizen to come into a system, connect because it wants to use a module, which would be a discussion or classifieds or a news feed or a local RSS feeder, etc., etc. But all this is a lot of information, or a lot of local information that that we could actually inject into a graph representation to have another visualization tool of the dynamic. So that's always something we're interested in, is have multiple visualizations of the same data sets.
Yeah, and that's something that we're actually quite aligned with as well. We'd like to see many different interfaces for both inputting and actually showing and displaying the data, besides the graph. It's it's totally necessary.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So Ishan, you've worked on collecting some input other than like people manually entering the thing, as you're saying, many different kinds of inputs.
Yeah, so there's a couple of approaches here to sort of automated graph creation. One is import, which we are thinking about and we'd like to do through JSON-LD, right? So that if we've got some JSON-LD that's available, we can go ahead and visualize that using Metamaps sort of front-end visualization. But as well,
already today.
No,
that already available?
No, we don't have the import yet. It's not too far off, but also we're not using JSON LD yet. We do make all the JSON available for every map already, and that can be taken and sort of visualized another way. But this is something that Elf was going to work with us a bit on, is seeing how we could restructure our JSON.
Yeah,
Anyways.
because that's what the question also I had for Tibor is how do you, because I'm not the technologist in there, so my questions may be a bit
no worries. Go ahead, just shoot them out.
the right way, but how can you take the data from all kinds of different places? Because the problem of all these projects that are, you know, bubbling all over the place is that they all create their own universe that has to be fed by activity, but they remain diffuse, which is the characteristic of being distributed. But then how do you connect the pieces, and how do you make the pieces interoperable? Because the feeling that I kind of have, and discussions that I've had of people working on the ground in communities, is that they're a bit fed up of registering there to put their data there, and then registering in another place, and then in another place. So how do you transport yourself in different places and draw stuff from different places into one ad hoc place to do stuff in a way that's interoperable and transparent? And I sense that that's what you're all working on, but I don't really, I'm not sure I'm picturing it right.
Just simply, to put it simply, you'll have, you can imagine it. Actually, ELF has developed part of a solution that explains what you're asking, which is PLP, a portable link profile. And let me get you off.
Yeah, well, that's what I was, because yes, I participated in We Share Labs type of stuff, and we've been talking about portable profiles and stuff. So the idea of how
What would happen in this situation is that you would have, Helen, you would have your PLP, your private PLP, but it doesn't really need to be just a PLP. But the fact that we're all getting together, and actually Elf just connected, so he might join us, and we'll definitely contribute to the answer. But what we're all trying to do is, now that we're all getting together to say, let's follow a process, let's follow a data format. If all our projects follow common vocabulary, you were talking about language earlier on, but that's exactly what we're trying to do. A common language allows us to have a person described in the same manner across all projects. So if you register in the Human Pixel with your PLP, let's say, but it could be anything that resembles and has the same vocabulary as the PLP. It could be a Metamaps, a portable profile, but you would just take your URL or your web ID. It would be an ID that belongs to you, and it's on your server, or someone could have it for you somewhere, and it would open your door with all the information that is in it, and you would just integrate it into the human pixel, and you wouldn't have to type anything else. You just add your URL, and the human pixel, since it's already linked data, and it's also conscious of the vocabulary you chose to use and to. Hi, Elf.
Hi, everyone.
Hello, hello.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm a bit sick. I think everyone's sick here. Some kind of flu epidemic.
Oh, I thought you were talking about what happened in France. That's
that's
the cold shower, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, well, yeah, you have to drink some rum and lemon.
Ginger.
And ginger and honey. Anyway, we were just talking actually, Elf, about PLP and explaining. Helen was asking how globally a common format and a common vocabulary shared by different entities and would enable us all to kind of communicate and interoperate. And
yeah, to group, degroup, reassemble, deassemble, go here, go there. And what I just posted on my GitHub thing is that I kind of described the form of a, ideal requirement of what, as a change agent, I'd like to be doing. Like, I'd like to be taking myself here, bringing people in another place, pull information.
If everything is on your profile or your data set, if you have your personal information, then you'll have the events you attended, or then you'll have the people you are connected with, the people you work with, your skills, etc., etc. You'll have a whole bunch of things that are just you, who you are, your GitHub repositories, your ideas, your thinking processes. If inside your thinking process you need some help, you'll have help requests. You can go very far in whatever you would like to develop inside your own Helen map and profile. And if you have systems like the Open Knowledge Directory or Elf's hackerspace environment, or the Human Pixel, or Assemblée Virtuelle, if they all have the same understanding of that common vocabulary, then just taking one link, which is Helen's profile, and dumping it into any of these platforms, you will automatically open your world to those platforms.
You're a connecting thing, like you're a crochet.
Absolutely. And if I give you the example of the Human Pixel, you'll come into the Human Pixel, and let's say the Human Pixel will have some additional information to complete your account. Let's say we have a dynamic that gets some new tags and some new vocabularies. It can create a map that's your let's say your profile can link to, and then that belongs to you, kind of, and you can even have it yourself on your own profile. That way, you are always keeping your information where you want it. It doesn't have to be somewhere else. Of course, for certain reasons, we'll have to kind of find a way to optimize it, so to make it more available. Sometimes it will be reproduced, but the original will always remain with Helen.
Yeah.
Maybe Elf, if you want to add something to all that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, often if someone asks me like, what's the benefit, I compare it to electric outlets, which everyone has experience with, that if you go somewhere and you have everyone different outlets or maybe different voltage, it's a pain because you always need some adapter in different places, you need different adapter to kind of connect. And, if you have kind of common standards for electric outlets, you just use them no matter where you are as you at home. And that's pretty much the same thing here, that it doesn't matter which software, whatever you use, if we use common knowledge representation formats, you just can use this information anywhere with any tooling, and no matter who publishes or creates it. So that's for me like very similar benefit as standard electric outlets.
Cool.
And also we will like now experiment more with Open Knowledge Foundation, Code for All, Mozillians, and so on, that we will say, many people actually are members of all those networks, and sometimes people just, don't take time to create another profile and another directory because it's a hassle, especially if someone moves and so on. But if you can just easily say, okay, that's me, go find my information, it updates automatically when you update it in your place, I think many people would more easily engage in different networks.
So you want me to explain in a couple of words what I'm up to, or?
Yes, please.
Sure.
So I'm trying to build a systemic language and to leverage the power of the pattern languages that are around and the pattern language communities. So I understood that, especially in France, there's not a real knowledge about what pattern languages are. And to summarize, they're basically standard types of problem solution patterns or templates or best practices, the combination of which constitutes a language because it can build up different types of solutions. And there are a huge number of pattern languages in many disciplines and areas, in architecture, in software, in music, in tsunami and earthquake preparedness, in collaboration learning, all kinds of things. And so what I'd like to specifically work on is pattern languages for social change. And the idea is that there's so many different angles from which social change is operated, and different governance or whatever solution models that aren't really understood the same way by all the different people in their different, let's say, solutioning silos, to make the story short. And sometimes people talk about solutions that are actually not solutions, but more of the same in a different type of setting. And so the idea was to say, how could we go back to the workings of the system? So what are the dynamics of solutions? What are what's going on in the system? How can you compare different business models or governance models or types of organizations, types of solutions to social problems in very simple and elementary ways, very abstract, so that you can basically retranslate them into the domain-specific languages and use the domain-specific pattern languages to apply them on the ground. So it's a different type of language than data language and data interoperability. It's more of a, let's say, it's more like an ontology that contains some form of epistemology. I don't want to get into theory and big words, but it's more like tagging systems that enable to semantically tag or qualify solutions or problems into the patterns and impacts or effects that they have, in order to match solutions, compare solutions, etc. So it's at the same time something that can be used as a alternative, how to describe alternatives or to describe systemic phenomena. But at the same time, it can be used as something to qualify algorithms or to go and do queries into solutions databases to find specific types of solutions that produce certain types of effects. So maybe you could say it's something that could qualify intents and effects.
Helen,
Different. Yeah.
sorry for interrupting. I see you talk about like very general concept, and since you work with it for a long time yourself, using your terms, how to describe it, it's maybe easier for you to navigate in that. I think at least for me, maybe for others, it would help if you work around some concrete example from real life and say, oh, that's a use case, let's say, and this is how my work addresses this use case, because at least for me, it's easier to relate on some concrete, less abstract use case, and then we can go levels abstraction higher to see how it generalizes. But if I see like no one concrete use case, it's hard for me to really like wrap my mind around it. So
well, for example, a use case is that I'm talking with someone who's been working in a community that develops LETs, the time banks and currencies and alternative types of fundings, and they have noticed that some of the solutions that they are setting up do not have the effects that they intend. So, for example, they thought that something was providing more equality in their community, and they end up seeing that it provides less equality, or it increases inequality. So they're interested to try and decompose the mechanisms of their mechanism of systemic model of functioning of their solution to try and understand why it went wrong. Now, another use case is, for example, for a couple of years, I've been talking with people who try and promote the commons at the UN. And we've been working on lists of recommendations. And the problem is that people, when they build their solutions and their policy recommendations, they build stuff that is systemically coherent. Same thing with a political program, let's say. But when you negotiate and you have people struggling to put this back in and take this out, etc., what you end up is that it starts to look like a laundry list of measures, and it loses its systemic effect and benefits. So if you want to create a commons that remains to the community and that has a certain type of governance, in the game of the negotiation, you take away one of the elements that makes the solution stand up, and the effect is lost. So it got me thinking to say, how can you simply express in a simple visual language the complexity of what you're trying to describe in words as an effect, and so that people can check if a negotiation is going to totally change the systemic effect of what you're negotiating in a policy, or to compare two different scenarios with a system of inquiry, etc. So it's a little bit, it's something that helps to simplify complexity, but it's a complex project. So is it more clear?
Yeah. That last point got me a lot more into what you're trying to do.
For example, I'll take another example. You know Brett Scott, the guy who hacks the financial system. He wrote the Hacker's Guide to the Financial System, and he's given a talk recently on open source finance, and he's saying that basically the financial system is such that there's a very concentrated number of people who master the mechanics of it, and the diffuse people who want to change it can't articulate how it works, why it doesn't work, what they don't like about it, and what they want to set up to replace it. And he wrote his Hacker's Guide to Finance with exactly this logic, to say he wants to decompose the financial system like a hacker, so that you get a vision on the inner working of the system, so that you can get the diffuse contestation or alternative to try and all work in a similar direction against this thing, but not necessarily agreeing on how to do it, but each getting to it from a different angle. So that's another example. So it's to enable this type of thing.
Understanding systems are often bringing them down to the smallest parts of it, and
but that's also a polemic, because some people say that you can't really understand the whole if you break down the parts. But the thing is that if you
that's where the links remain.
Exactly. That's where you can probe. So the idea is to have the elements, to break it down so that you can probe the connections, and that you can probe as sequences or combinations of things. So, for example, people talk about the Jevons effect in energy efficiency. And the Jevons effect says that if you create more efficiency in your use of energy, you'll end up consuming more energy. It's an unwanted effect. But this only happens if your tap of your output of your resource remains open, so that if there's less consumption on the existing market, the supplier is going to find other markets to output as an outlet for the output. So energy efficiency can only work if you close the tap of the production, and if you're in a circular economy. So the idea is to say tap open. So I'm being very schematic, but tap open plus energy efficiency creates this effect. Tap close plus circular economy creates this effect.
Do you know Brett Victor? I can hear Ishan and Elf are more into. I definitely. I love this conversation, but I think we're going a bit out of the bounds of it.
Yeah. So I'll stop there. But Brett Victor, yes, definitely, he's on my list, but because he wants to basically see the creation as you're creating it.
Yeah,
and
that's his.
That's
he has a great thinking process.
Yeah. So I'm a bit off what you're actually doing, but I think it's complementary, because at some point it can help qualify, and it can be brought into conversations about community, about alternatives, about social change. It can be brought into the discussions, but it's not a technology solution per se. So I've been talking with Martin, for example, at the Assemblée Virtuelle, because it could be a system to tag projects, tag ideas. That project is working on this type of pattern. It could maybe help describe the intents of distributed automatic, the DAOs, I forget what it stands for, on the blockchain type of stuff. How do you calculate the intended effect of an algorithm? Stuff like that.
Yeah, I resonate with what you're saying. On the side of the change maker.
Who's okay? Yeah.
Yeah, I muted you, Elf, just because there was a bunch of noise from a fan. I resonate with what you're saying on that level. It's how I think about systems as well, and often how I use metamaps to sort of break down the different dynamics of collaboration and sort of parse those things out. But what I've encountered again and again is the limitation of the tools. And so I'm very much oriented. I want to say I resonate with what you're communicating and understand the value in it. And simultaneously, I'm very much in a position or situation, context myself, where I'm looking to see, okay, we've got these different projects. How can we actually advance all of this on a technical level? And it's almost a process where I almost have, it's like this, you know, usually, you know, as a futurist, you're looking way out wide, and you're looking far, and you're seeing and designing solutions. But as on the technical level of building, I'm down here looking at the next step, and then I'm almost just glancing up to see what else is happening and to coordinate. And so I'd like to bring the conversation in some sense to this level of, okay, we've all got this, like, we've all got sort of similar ideas around the potential of the graph. We all understand that there's a real need for interoperability across different interfaces for data, and simplifications in relation to, not simplifications, but ways to have our data travel with us. You know, this points to personal clouds, this points to all sorts of identity protocols and different things like this. A lot of these beyond maybe a few steps down the road. A lot of them may be closer. So my interest in connecting with Assembly Virtuelle and with you, Tibor, and of course with you, Elf, is on a couple different levels. One, I'm very interested in seeing how we could implement JSON-LD with Metamaps, like in the short term, and our team doesn't currently have the capabilities to do so. We don't have the expertise. And two is that Assembly Virtuelle, and I don't know if you have some interest in this as well, Tibor, but at some point they said that they wanted to fork Metamaps. They wanted to take a version of Metamaps and they wanted to use PAIR, the peer access resources. I forget exactly what it stands for, but use that and customize the interface some, and then potentially build upon it. So I want to see, are there options, Tibor? Do you have ideas around that? Is there anything that I could do to facilitate? How could we see? What I can tell you about Metamaps right now is that we just did this new release, and then what I think we're looking to do next is integrate text and audio and video, at least on the interface level, into maps themselves, because right now it's actually very exciting what's happening. Every so often I'll get onto Metamaps, I'll go to the recently active maps, and I'll jump into a map that someone else is actively working on. For instance, if any of you are logged in and join me here.
You can't share a screen here?
It's the interesting thing is the real-time collaboration.
Oh,
so
okay,
it's
but I'm not sure I have a login handy, so.
Tibor, this is actually your map that you made of Pixel Humo.
Okay.
There's an experience that's happening in relation to real-time mapping that's actually quite powerful from a collaborative design perspective. What I'm seeing happen is we've got, we're doing a lot of mapping with WeShare. That's starting up more and more with Auli, and we're going to be sort of launching a mapping initiative using Metamaps to map out all the different projects of different people involved in WeShare and WeShare Labs, etc. But also there's, just like you've created this map of Pixel Humain, and there's the Assembly Virtuelle map, it's being used for collaborative design. And so what I'm seeing is potentially it's almost, we're bootstrapping, right? So it's like, how can we actually better be able to design solutions together? For me, that's what I've considered as the step that I'm interested in taking towards actually sort of manifesting new solutions and platforms. So and I don't know if any of you made it into that map yet. Doesn't look like it quite yet.
I need to reset password.
What's that?
I need to reset password. If I can put Mozilla Persona on the wish list.
Yeah, I know.
It's actually quite simple. If someone wants to pair with me who knows Metamaps, I think, in 1-2 hours we can get Persona there, and I know how Persona works. So that was my suggestion. That I don't know Metamaps, so it's hard for me to just start coding on it. But if we start peering, every 2 weeks or something, just for 1-2 hours. Yesterday I met with Jun and with OpenOil again. I said, know my RDF stuff, he knows his OpenOil stuff, and together we can get stuff forward, because he doesn't have to know RDF. While we do that, he learns. I don't have to know OpenOil or take 2 days to learn it, because he's right next to me and he did it. So
yeah,
I think that would be my proposal, to try this kind of remote peer programming.
I like the idea of remote pair coding sessions. And yeah, our documentation, Elf, everything is actually a lot more organized. I was telling Tibor, but Connor did a large code refactor. It still has a ways to go in terms of, I mean, we still have a lot to go in terms of even rethinking the fundamental architecture of the whole system. However, what we're taking the approach of is saying, okay, this is what we have. We need to sort of continue redesigning. Sorry, I'll mute you again. Oh yeah, thanks.
So I can't log in. They don't find me.
Try resetting your password. It does work if you try that.
No, it doesn't recognize either of my emails. I was at some point a member of it, so that was long ago, so I don't know. Never mind, I'll listen to what you say.
Yeah, and you can see us on the map here. I'll share my screen so that you can see this and the experience of it.
Thank you.
There's no zoom from keyboard yet, but you can use in the bottom right. You've at least got a little zoom in, zoom out.
Yeah.
So yeah, basically, we're seeing all of this in real time now with Tibor here, with Elf. We can go and create new types of things. Like, for instance, I'll bring in Metamaps as a topic to this map, and they'll see it come off in real time. Any edits, anything else that you're making comes up in real time. We've now got sort of rich snippets that are inside here now. Yeah, go ahead.
Ishan, I don't know if I've frozen, but the idea, I'm thinking, when I'm listening to you, I hear that maybe you would like also a session of brainstorming or sharing ideas that would enhance Metamaps, maybe, or just get outside feedback.
Yeah, most definitely. I mean, we have been working as well quite a bit on. Sorry, I'll switch back. That was just a simple example. And Elf, yeah, there may be some problems with Firefox. We've hit some. If you're using Firefox, no.
I use Chrome, but I'll try again. I'll try again. No worries.
Yeah, usually, I mean, if you just refresh, usually it's still a little bit buggy, but we have had some amazing sessions of like 6 people on a map, combined with a Google Hangout, and really actually designing designing process and mapping out conversation, and it's working really nicely. It's starting to feel really solid. So the other thing is we've been increasing our collaborative infrastructure, if you will. All our designs are open source on Pixel Apps. So I'll show you sort of what we're using here. Here's one link. This is where all of our designs are. We also have an entire, we use another thing called Envision to actually get feedback on the mock-ups themselves, like the individual mock-ups, and commenting on those. We have now to translate all of our stuff that we've been using Asana for, like all of development tasks and bugs and stuff, back into GitHub so we can open up that process. But the point is that we're doing as much as we can to open up participation and collaboration on it. That means that, you know, there's a lot that can influence where we go with the interface, but it also depends on, you know, the network that will be involved at the particular moment and the skills that we've got.
So, what stack is it running on?
Right now, it's using PostgreSQL as a database. We're using Ruby and a lot of JavaScript. We're using a bunch of different libraries. We've been using a library called JIT, JavaScript Infoviz Toolkit. We've highly customized it. It almost makes sense to throw it away and rebuild something from scratch. Of course, there's a lot that we'd like to plan for to do that, and a lot to design. So, you know, that's a consideration. That's the stack.
There's one thing I often reproche. I have not against, but it's like there's always something missing in these online tools where the tool is in. You have to go to that website itself, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a huge. I mean, there's always that approach where you're collaborating and you're working with others inside a map, and that's a great feature.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also that other feature where Digo is very strong at. I don't know if you know Digo. It's like delicious. And you're mapping ideas. You can map elements inside a website. And you're doing everything from where you are. You don't go into Digo to do something. It all happens wherever you are. You can contribute to somewhere inside Digo.
Yeah.
So the process is kind of reversed. Of course, maybe that's in your close future, but that's really practical and really gets people using the interface because Digo kind of exists without existing, and whenever I really need it, then I go to see Digo.
Mm-hmm.
I use the plugin to contribute to whatever I want to contribute to, my environment, and then I use Digo as a... So, I mean, those tools are really extraordinary for classifying information and are really great.
Yeah.
I see actually Metamaps in a similar way, and I mean, it would be great to have those a similar approach where your map continues and grows, but from a little tool, really a small tool. It can from any context.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, we've done prototypes of a mobile app, which would enable you simply no map interface, but simply to send particular topics to a map of your choice. And of course, also it would be great to have some sort of browser plugin so that you're actually able to just like highlight on the fly, send concepts to a map. Yeah, I would like to see that as well.
But you're in LA. It would be such an amazing project to link with something like Digo. Metamaps linked with a Digo interface. I mean, there's so much to do because they've already got the tool, and if you have just a new visualization tool, which is the Metamaps, then it's a winner. You got it. You mix up those two projects, but I think they're more in. They're not in the open value network.
I don't think so. Not exactly.
Yeah.
I have a suggestion for a concrete, let's say, user story which could work in, like, let's say, 2 months to implement together and get a little exercise in maybe collaborating.
Okay.
So I see many maps include people because it's often about people and networking. So we could work in a way that we, let's say, connect to our personal address books in some personal cloud, let's say remote storage. Also, they work on a contact kind of module, so you can easily connect to remote storage, fetch all your address book. Then you have auto-completion in your software based on the data that you have in your little personal cloud, no matter which software you use, as long as you can understand the data type.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you create a map, again, you create a person node, but then you just have auto-completion to say, I want to create the person of type person node, and then it allows you to autocomplete from your address book, and then it fetches all the information about the person from this person, personal profile, and that would be, I think, quite interesting case to say, okay, for now, let's get our address books accessible there, which are in a separate personal cloud, so they're not tied into the app or the service itself. Remote storage probably would work as at this moment, like something there functioning, and also I think nice to connect with people from unhosted. And then again, we just don't need to type information about people over and over. We just have, okay, just drag and drop someone from our address book and the person is already on the map.
I definitely see that use case. It's excellent to Elf, and also the capacity of a metamap to be able to kind of navigate inside an ontology, inside a vocabulary itself. So if you're going from a JSON LD, or you could, if you create a person, then you would have all the attributes. I have something very similar to this that I just kind of built up, but with a visual interface, it would be just an amazing tool to be able to build your profile or fill up your properties, and then go and find people and connect with events, etc. And that the use case Elf was explaining is great.
One thing I'll point out in relation to that, which I've discovered, is that these maps become unwieldy too quickly. They become so complex that it's hard to, you need all of this functionality to sort of manage that complexity. And I would say that on the interface level, we still need to do a bunch of innovation there, in some senses, before we start looking at a lot of sort of automated input or combining of data from different sources. Because simply on an interface level, if it's not sort of working there, like that's where I think the first part of the innovation needs to happen, in some senses. Also, like I don't want to lose in some sense, Metamaps is very good for sort of mapping out networks of people. I mean, I'm often using it for those purposes, but simultaneously for mapping out these conversations or sense-making different complex issues, that's a design process and that's a modeling process. It is sometimes specific to a map or to a conversation. Sometimes it's using concepts from the commons. But it's a blend of contexts in a way, and you're always sort of playing a boundary or a barrier between, okay, what's applicable in this context? Where do I want things to link to the commons, and where do I not want things to link to the commons? And this is all about like how we actually manage the complexity on the interface level. I think the distributed storage, just having the commons, the knowledge commons itself distributed, is highly necessary, and having our own personal clouds and our own data stores, that's the direction that it's going. I mean, eventually, I see there being no centralized metamaps at all. I would like everyone to be running it on their own servers. But that still doesn't. That's still the interface question remains. Right, despite the sort of back-end architecture of where the data is actually being stored.
Yeah, but with the interface question, from my experience, it's like you cannot make interface that one size fits all. So that's why I find it super important that people can use their data in different interfaces, because you will optimize your interface in a certain direction that matches your kind of usage patterns. But again, you have your preferences, and even for the same task, for the same project, another person say, okay, it doesn't fit me, that's not how I visualize my thoughts, I need to use different interface, like with the email clients. You have your email client, we send same emails to each other, but it's not that there's the best email client interface. So that's why I think no matter how much you will try to like perfect your interface, it will still only fit certain usage patterns for certain people. So again, you can go into infinity with trying to like perfect it, but still, I think if you enable to work with different data sets, it's much more likely that people will actually start using it for some useful and real life practical. Because now if I create a metamaps, it's like, okay, my information gets stuck over there, and if I have other tool chains to work with the information, it's like I need to duplicate it all there. And if we find a way that I can get my data from my, let's say, little cloud, which is nicely structured as a knowledge graph, and then I can point the tool there, say, hey, that's all my knowledge. The tool can start assisting me. So if I click, for example, if I make a metamaps about organizations, like the tips metamap, organizations, projects, people, on my webpage, if you go, you can see it's already all there in RDF. Actually, in RDFA or JSON-LD, you can negotiate. You will see that if you click on me, for example, if you drag me on the metamap, you click on me and you say, I want to get an organization, you can get all the organizations, and then you can take the relevant ones and drag it on the map. So you don't have to like think, oh, which organizations Elf is participating in. The computer will know because I publish this information online. So later you can start also discovering more. Than when you click on an organization, you can see participants, and then maybe something will highlight you that you know someone through two different like other people through some projects. So I think it's actually quite beneficial that no matter of an interface, to have this capacity to work with some existing data, so you don't need to duplicate the same data, which I think no one enjoys doing.
No, I totally see the value and understand the utility in what you're saying, because even as I'm seeing here, like I just spent today about 2.5 hours mapping a whole bunch of the structure of WeShare as an organization. Do I want that to necessarily live just on Metamaps? Definitely not. Like, are there other ways to actually display that knowledge? Absolutely. Would I not have preferred not to spend 2.5 hours mapping it out manually and just being able to sort of go to where the JSON is and go ahead and visualize it, and then be doing actually the work that matters for me, which is the next stage of that, which is the sense making on top of it? Yes, absolutely. So there's no sort of disagreement argument there. I'm just where I definitely want to be proving out that part of the utility. And at the same time, I see a lot of value in actually the particular approach that Metamaps is taking to the interface sort of questions. And so I want to continue. That's important, I think, as a modeling, as building a platform for a modeling tool for solutions for collaborative design. I mean, that's why we're hitting that. We're focusing on that challenge right there, right? Collaborative. How can we facilitate sort of collaborative design? Because that's what things potentially can stem from. In a serious way, and we're already seeing that with people mapping out different projects, etc.
Right.
So,
opening them up. How are the import capacities of Metamaps? I didn't see any importing module because sometimes.
Yeah, we have not. I mean, that's a functionality that Elf, we had mentioned at some point, like seeing, okay, can we write some little script to translate our JSON to JSON-LD. And I talked to Connor a little bit about, Connor is the lead developer on Metamaps. Yeah, from the emails. But yeah, he said, yes, it would be possible to actually just go to a web page and grab a web page that actually was hosting that JSON-LD, and if we had that script, we could visualize it within Metamaps. So.
Well, actually, I think at one point I went into the code and tried to find the JSON structure that was behind the Metamaps, so I could export my own data and start structuring it as a Metamaps JSON structure. I didn't have any entry point, so I couldn't import it because it would have made me gain a lot of time because all this information is already linked and mapped in my database.
Right. So the code of the last version, which is why we sort of asked, we were like, when Assembly Virtual was like, yeah, we want to hack it, we said, just wait a little bit. Totally refactored. There's still a lot of documentation to do, but it makes a lot more sense, and even the JSON structure is better, is done better. It's not to where it needs to be yet, but there's more of an entrance now, and I can help facilitate that if you want to explore that.
And just with data structure, sort of interrupting, I know if you realize that RDF is a directed labeled graph, and on your screen I see directed labeled graph. So it's like, it seems like your meta map is like very easy fit to RDF because pretty much the structure you have on the screen is pretty much how you structure information in RDF. So it's, except some cases, if you put too much information on edges, that's a very straightforward pattern that, okay, any JSON LD should be easy to render in the metamap because that's pretty much the same data structure. The model is the same.
It's super simple in a way that you could just give us users of Metamaps the possibility to plug our own data set.
Yeah.
So if you just give us an input and say, okay, where on the web is your data set, your JSON data, I would just put my URL and you would eat it up. It would be a visualization tool.
Yeah, and that's something that I would love to have an import functionality and potentially work with different people on it.
So how about we do like a half a day, hack day, remotely pairing? And I don't know if you already have your structured data profiles. I know Tip have. I have one that we will say, okay, like now what I do now, I copy my link and, for example, go to RDFA play and paste the source code over there. It shows me the graph of the information I have in my RDF. So what I would do, I can also get the JSON LD version with content negotiation. So I would like to go to Metamaps, paste the link over there on a node, and it will fetch all the information and maybe render me for now all the stuff because it should be quite straightforward. And I think in a half a day you can just make a branch and hack some demo of that and deploy it as a demo and play with it. And that would be like some concrete bite-sized piece. Maybe the address book is too sophisticated for like half a day. I think we can get there in half a year, the longest, if we meet once a month or something like that. For the one session, I think, okay, let's get existing data there that someone would want to use, like for example me, and try to render it as a metamap. And I think if we do it in a half a day, 4 people, something like that, that would be for me like a maybe step we could try to organize.
Yeah, I think that'd be a great start. I would love to do that.
Okay.
What I could do is, what I can do is maybe start a sort of hackpad on it. We can start actually specking out what the sort of import functionality would consist of. And then I'll also, I'm doing all the sort of the graphic design, so I could actually mock up a small little experience of that as well, so that we actually have some UX to work with alongside of it. We would actually want to take that further. So.
One thing that I think Tibor has mentioned when he was talking about Digo, and I was a bit distracted by something, but what you were saying, Tibor, is that if you have an annotation application, then you could pair it with Metamaps and send pieces of what you annotate or what you bookmark directly into nodes of Metamaps. Was that the idea?
I was just referring to the highlighting process that is available in Digo.
Okay. So I went one step. I went one.
No, but it's exactly what you're saying. Is that when linked to a structure like Metamaps, you can follow a sync process.
Yeah, because as a user and as a moderator in many social network communities with conversations that kind of work quite well in a sequential way, chronological or threaded, but then what you can, or if you look at the next edge or whatever type of Facebook groups or alternatives to it, it's important to have a simple way for people to have conversations and not need to think about in which node what I'm going to say is going to fit, because you lose the synchronicity and the spontaneousness. But if you can reprocess conversations and say this bit I send it here and this bit I drag it there, that would be really, really, really useful. And it's something that I've been trying to get from Debate Graph. You were talking about Compendium, Ishan, but I've been doing the same thing with Debate Graph.
Yeah.
And they have it on their list too. How do you reprocess conversations easily into a map. One thing is to get the data from a database, it's already there, but what do you do with content that's generated on the fly in a more or less spontaneous, flowing way, where you don't want to think every time you say something where you're going to put it? So that will be my contribution to the HackPad and to the hackathon, where I will not attend.
Cool. Okay, well, I mean, I would love to schedule this sometime, maybe this month, maybe later this month, where we can work on sort of an import functionality, because I think that would be a huge value add for a lot of different people.
So maybe you start a HackPad, you send link to us, and we walk from there and try to, next 2-3 weeks, let's say, get this session set up, and it would be me, Tip, maybe some other friends from who work on this PLP stuff and so on. And I think if 5-6 people take different tasks, in half a day we should have working, Metamaps stuff, I know RDF stuff. I think there should be no obstacle to, in half a day, get the demo up and running that people can play with, and we have something to work from later.
And we definitely need, it would be a plus to have Connor around.
Yeah.
To
that would be necessary.
Things back into Metamaps.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yep, cool. That would be cool.
Okay, so what I'll do is I'll set this in motion with the HackPad and send this off to you guys tomorrow, and we can start going from there. I feel like this is quite a good and realistic potential start to engaging with one another more actively.
Awesome.
Cool.
Well, it's getting a bit late for you, isn't it?
Yes, I think I'm going to head to bed soon.
Good
but
night.
Thank you guys so much for your time.
Yeah,
it's a pleasure to speak to you all.
Same here. I'm really happy that we made it again.
Yeah.
Right. Very cool. See you, everyone.
And thanks for Gavin's email address. And if you can send me Siphon's one or introduce me.
Sure, I will.
Cool. Okay, and Tibor, if you want to have a chat one day.
Sure, definitely. I heard a lot of things that were really interesting, and I think
okay.
we definitely have to. Cool.
Great. Tibor,
take care, everyone.
Bye.
Happy New Year, by the way.
Take care.
Have a good day.
Bye-bye.
Helen and Tip.
Bye, Elf.
Bye.